Hello, everyone. Welcome to the second ever edition of Ask the Experts, where we talk to really smart people in the Restaurant Technologies Network and utilize their expertise for your business. Today, we have someone really special, Alissa Partee, who is the CPO at Restaurant Technologies. She's been with RT for 3 years. Before that, she was with Caribou Coffee and Einstein Bros Bagel. She holds an HR degree from the University of Minnesota and an MBA from DePaul. And she is the proud CPO of one of this year's America's Best Workplaces and America's Most Diverse Workplaces, according to Newsweek, and an MSP Business Journal Best Places to Work award winner. So lots of accolades, Alissa. So first, we're kind of patting ourselves on the back here, but congratulations on all the awards. How are you doing today?
I'm wonderful. Thanks, David. No, for everything that could go wrong or an organization struggles with, it's nice to take a moment and say there's a lot of good happening as well.
Yeah, and definitely. Just a really good workplace culture, obviously, and a great team that has helped build that, led by the C-suite, yourself included. So we're going to talk about some ways to build a positive workplace culture to recruit and retain employees in hospitality. As we know, labor has been a really big challenge coming out of the pandemic a few years ago, and it continues to be top of mind for those business owners. Before we get into all that, let's get to know you a little bit better. So let's start with three things. So my first question is, what is your favorite place to go or your favorite thing to do outside of work?
Well, might be a little cliche, but I absolutely love checking out restaurants in any city that I'm in. I have the privilege to travel to one of our 41 operating locations across the country where we service our customers. And so I love to be able to go in and check into those customers, have a meal there, meet people there, bring the team there. But it's probably my number one place that I go next outside of work and home is restaurants.
All right, so I'm going to ask you at the risk of kind of going down and making this snowball a little bit. So it might be four questions instead of three, but what is your favorite food city? Because I've had this debate with many people.
Oh, come on, David. That's not even fair. That's not even fair. There'd be like, give me your top 10.
Well, okay, how about this? Just throw out a few that you
How about a couple unsuspecting ones, first of all?
Okay, that works.
Okay. Minneapolis is known for, first and foremost, cold weather.
Yes.
They have a incredible food scene. And not just James Beard winners, but also a place where people can try a bunch of different cuisines, really push the envelope of what would fit the mold, right? We're not known for one type of food, which is really cool in Minneapolis. So I think Minneapolis is a little bit of a sleeper comparatively.
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
It's a little bit of a homer answer, but I'll agree with it.
Yeah, maybe I'm a little biased.
So my second question is, why did you decide on HR for your career?
I don't know if I chose it or if it chose me. I remember thinking, how did I end up here? And I actually, early on, my MBA is actually a dual MBA. It's an MBA in human resource management and corporate finance. My very first job came by happenstance. I met an individual. His name was Don Delves. He had a boutique consulting firm that had helped board of directors manage their executive pay, incentive, and benefit programs. And I met him. We had this like instant kind of connection of like, gosh, I could learn a lot from you. So I started my earliest career as one of the youngest people in the boardroom, helping situate executive teams to focus on the right things, deliver incredible shareholder value, and be rewarded accordingly. So that had a perfect mix of this finance background, understanding how businesses make money, what are the main value drivers in an organization, but also had this people element that we're trying to extrinsically and intrinsically motivate people to deliver something that's meaningful. So by way of that, I met different customers. Buffalo Wild Wings was one of our clients. and they had an opportunity to for me to move back to Minneapolis and be part of their human resources team, and that's where it got started. So a little bit by kind of being thrown into a environment that certainly wasn't a lot of 20-year-olds, by the way, but an incredible environment to learn fast what mattered for businesses to thrive. They want to be high performing, well run organizations. They entrust that vision with a senior leadership team. They're supported, hopefully, by a board that has shared goals and visions for that organization. And then I stumbled into Buffalo Wild Wings, and from there, I stayed in it. I love what I do. I love the fact that HR doesn't exist to support itself. It exists to support an organization, and that we get to look at an organization tip to tip, essentially, and see where people can drive value in a business. So it just fit. I don't think I would have picked it if I was in an organization earlier to that.
Yeah, I think that's so interesting because I think it's so interesting where life always takes us. I think 15 years ago, I would not have pictured myself necessarily where I am today.
Right.
But you kind of just fall into things and things, you kind of just keep going and you just end up where you're meant to be, I think. So
Yeah, and I
that's
think
a
you
very
do
familiar
that.
story. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you do that when you have people in front of you and around you looking for where you naturally fit
Hmm.
and provide value. I've had this conversation actually with our CEO. Said, hey, if people are natural born athletes, those who kind of defy the odds in a sport of their choice, can't there be natural born athletes in business where
Hmm.
people who are just kind of naturally good at it? Well, who's in
Yeah.
charge of identifying their talent? Scouts, coaches,
Yeah.
fellow teammates, people
Hmm.
in your social network. And so what I love kind of about the ecosystem of human resources or human capital management, that is a main part of our job. It's not to, oh yeah, of course there's some not so fun things about our function, but our job is to really create value through the people we have the privilege of leading.
Hmm.
And it takes a network of people to watch for those talents in people, to pick them up, pluck them out, and put them in a situation where they can thrive almost naturally, just like a natural born athlete.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a really interesting way to look at it. All right, so let's get into it a little bit. I think one of the most intriguing things to me about HR is how many layers it has. And the more you learn about it, the more complex it is. And for this reason, I've always been curious as to how to best tackle these challenges. And so I was really excited to talk to you about some of these questions that we have coming up. So
Great.
you were in a unique situation during the pandemic with Caribou and then switching over to RT. Can you tell me what you learned from Caribou as everything was changing and then getting to RT on the back end and how you adapted or how the organization adapted and thrived?
Absolutely. So I had the chance to work with Caribou Coffee, a combination of businesses actually. So it's Caribou Coffee, Einstein Brothers Bagels, Brugger's Bagels, Noah's Bagels out in the on the West Coast, and I was with them for about 3 years prior to the COVID pandemic setting in and really kind of dropping a bomb on our business. Think about the breakfast industry that Caribou and Einstein's participates in. We thrived off of the morning day part. We thrived off of the commute, and we thrived off of people bringing our amazing coffee and amazing bagels into their work site. That was where majority of our business was. We had a thriving catering business that allowed us to do meal planning for breakfast, primarily breakfast meetings.
Mhm.
Well, all of a sudden, when people are pulling back from either their morning commute because they're now going to work from home, or we, of course, during the pandemic, shifted away from sharing food together for a while, and we ended up shifting it at home. I I was part of the team who had to navigate the downturn of the business simply because the demand changed almost overnight. And I remember us sitting through a couple senior executive meetings where we were looking at metrics. We kind of had a air traffic controller dashboard style where we could see how stores were performing, same store sales week over week, day part by day part. And I remember us watching the catering trend start to slump about 7 or 8 weeks prior to the pandemic sitting in. This is like early January. So remember the forces that were upon the industry. Primarily, they started on our coast. That's not uncommon for things to enter from the European coast or the Asian coast of the United States, right? So they start to encroach into our business, into our territories that we serve our customers. And the number one kind of canary in the coal mine was the fact that our catering started to fall back rapidly in unprecedented change. So we said, hey, this is a real force on our business. What followed after catering, when people started to pull back from group meetings, which was primarily, think about the technical coasts and the big cities that would have large in-person meetings. Then it started to hit day parts that were more residential or commercial in nature, where people started pulling back from spending money because they're like, what's going on here? And then all of a sudden, all the regulations came in and who could be where, right? Could you open a restaurant? Could you operate with an open door policy? Was food going home? And so what happened is we had a really nasty storm hitting our brands, and we had to navigate significant layoffs to meet the demand, which moved into a trickle. What we tried to do during that, which I think every business tried to do, was keep the core healthy. And in our business at Caribou, and I think this is really reflective of the industry, a lot of people would look at a restaurant and say, the core is the leadership team at the restaurant. Could be a general manager, it could be the hospitality manager, front of house, back of house, the ones who were likely the most capable of knowing the entire operation. And so we had to cut way back to our core. And we operated that way for many months. So this was March when we really felt the deepest cut, where things really cut back. And then from March until about August, we were starting to just kind of weather and reset our business. We changed our menu. We pulled back on slow movers. We took a chance to kind of clean up some waste that sat in our business process, in our organization design. And we operated that way for about 7 months. And at that time, I was actually starting to pursue an opportunity with RT. So feeling that pain of going through the shutdown and shuttering, in some cases, of our stores, impacting our frontliners who were day makers. They were people who came in and brightened your day, the first hour of your day. We're sending them home and saying, holy cow, we don't know how long this is going to go. But the compassion of making sure we had them, took care of them in terms of having resources, whether it was state resources or federal resources, was our number one priority. And I still use this even at RT. I said, it's my job or our jobs to support you at RT, and in the event, or at the company, right? Or in the event that you have to leave for whatever reason, there's still support we can provide to somebody after they leave. So that, long story, probably long by now, David, the transition to RT is I came in and I met with the team like June, July timeframe. And I was able to look and watch and hear from the team directly on how they continued to service customers during the pandemic. If you remember, kind of a lifeline, like a major artery for restaurants, was if they had a drive-through or not. Most of our business is in QSR. There's a lot of fast food, drive-through enabled restaurants that we serve. Our business model is built to be able to service our customers, whether there's people in the restaurant or not. The restaurant doesn't have to be open for us to be able to effectively and safely deliver oil. That's a pretty cool thing.
Mm-hmm.
And when the pandemic set in, a lot of food went to grocery stores. People had to cook at home, pick up ready to eat meals at the grocery store. So this dynamic of where you got food shifted. And the cool thing about RT is we're in grocery stores as well. So I'm looking at this business model saying, wow, everything they did during the pandemic was purely to make sure the customers that were in total chaos still were serviced by RT.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I wasn't part of all those decisions of how it became, but I got to witness it from this neutral position of considering to join RT. And when I joined RT, our first order of business was how do we get into the industry? How do we meet the industry where they're at, recognizing that COVID impacted how they thought about labor. And the labor market responded with a whole different expectations of what an employer would offer them. It changed wage expectations. It changed hours of work expectations. It changed, in many cases, it created at-home opportunities where people didn't have to roll up their sleeves and get dirty. So it really changed how not only restaurants had to respond, but recognize that they were experiencing an entirely new labor market expectation. I think what cool thing about RT, one of many amazing things that we do is we are entrusted by industry customers to service something that they can't do themselves. They rely on us. So when we start to look at what we do to attract people in to RT, so we can service our customers, we got to change how we handled that as well.
Mm-hmm. You talked a lot about, adapting and evolving, especially during the pandemic and coming out of it. So can you tell me maybe some ways businesses can be proactive in adapting and have the foresight to see what's needed or what's coming around the corner? And what are the risks of maybe adapting too late?
I know that one of the blessings that we had, whether it was at Caribou, and I know from also from the RT side, is data to forecast was a critical asset to have.
Mm-hmm.
Organizations, I've used this kind of example in the past. The rear view mirror of a car is this big, right? For a reason. It explains where you've been or what's behind you.
Mm-hmm.
The front windshield of a car is 50 times the size of a rear view mirror. Why is that? Because where you're going is far more important than where you've been. But if you're driving your car by the rear view mirror, something's going to happen. You're going to miss the turn. You're going to miss the pivot. And so I think what it does is like organizations that don't have adequate and in some cases creative ways to forecast, what if I do this, or what if I do this, or what if I pull this lever? If they are unable to forecast out and have the foresight to see what's ahead, they will never be able to adapt quick enough. Mm-hmm. So it's spend time in the market, look at trends in the market, know what businesses. For us, one of the things that was critical for us was watching traffic patterns on Google Trends. Mm-hmm. We knew exactly where people were driving. They weren't driving through certain parts of our town, so we had to get food to them. But that's the type of, I think it's a critical element, is to say what can we look that's in a forward sense to be able to react to or scenario plan against today.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things that RT does, at least for marketing, and I know throughout the organization as well, is that RT gives us the tools that we need to be prepared for the next challenge. And I think that's, critical for any business. So let's Yeah. So let's talk about labor retention and labor recruiting because that's a big issue in the industry. I think, for any organization our size that's nationwide, it can also be a challenge, especially at the local depot levels as well. So I think we need to break this kind of down into two categories. So if you were CEO of a national franchise, kind of at that corporate level, and you need to build this culture and share this culture down into kind of the local levels, right? What are some ways to build your culture from the top down, and how do you get buy-in from those franchisees at the lower levels?
Core to a franchisor relationship is in the eyes of the franchisee. They're going to look at the franchisor and say, do you have my best interests in mind? Now, I'm not talking about how do you get involved in the relationship that we have to maintain in independence with the franchisor versus franchise. I'm not talking about any of that. What I'm simply asking or simply saying is they're going to look up at an organization that carries the biggest part of their brand, which is the logo, and say, are you and I aligned? Do you and I have the same wishes for my restaurant, even though you don't run it? And so I think a lot of people will start with like marketing, and is that aligned? Do we have an alignment on how we're going to attack marketing of either new customers or to drive traffic? But in terms of culture, a franchisee will feel the support they get from a franchisor. And if that's not there, it's hard for them to replicate that into their own network of franchisees. So I think it starts there. It's that alignment of kind of in it to win it together. And if those aren't aligned, then they're like, you don't have my best interests in mind. You're disconnected from me. How can I trust you are going to take care of me and help my business grow and thrive?
Right. Listening. Yeah, such a big part of any leadership, right, is listening to the needs of the people on your team, right? So in a very similar sense, just listening to what they need and what they want and trying to get there. And sometimes it requires meeting in the middle a little bit, right? But just being able to listen and adapt to what your team needs. So secondly, at the local level with a local franchisee, maybe a franchisee with multiple locations, or maybe an independent restaurant, or like a regional chain with 15 locations. What are some things that can be done to engage kind of your hourly employees?
It's meeting them where they're at. What do they want from you? And if you're not able to, I mean, it's like simple, it's almost kind of brilliantly simple in my mind. We tend to overcomplicate the employee experience all the time. We overcomplicate what people are looking for in a job, like all the time. They want to know that their needs are going to be met. Typically, that does have at least a pay element. Okay, let's call a spade a spade. They want to know that they're respected at work. They want to know that if things are going wrong, they're supported. And if you're not delivering on, especially probably more of the support mechanism, which I think it ties in from a corporate level all the way down to a local level, all the way into a team. If somebody doesn't feel supported or wanted, you can't possibly pay them enough to stay. They'll leave. If they don't have the tools and resources to do their job, they'll leave. They'll leave for something easier. They'll leave for something that makes them more money and at least kind of offsets what they don't have elsewhere. And I think that's the biggest thing that we spent a lot of time with that at Caribou and Einstein's too, is just saying, what does the team member expect from us and need from us? And are we meeting them? Are we meeting their simple needs? It's kind of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Food, water, shelter. If you don't have food, water, shelter, you're not moving on to any other layer of support.
Right. Sometimes the best answer is the simplest answer.
Yes. We overcomplicate everything. I tease about that all the time.
Yeah.
I don't tease. There's a lot of seriousness to that.
Yeah. This reminds me of, I think, a campaign that we talked about that we did a couple years ago around 3 and 4 day work weeks for RT employees, for drivers and technicians. And when we looked at the turnover rate versus the industry, our turnover rate was like, I want to say a third of
Yes.
of the rest of the industry because of those 3 and 4 day work weeks. And that is a big was a big, huge thing to those employees based on the conversations that I had with them. And I'm sure that adjustment took a lot of work, a lot of discussions, had to get through, a lot of processes to get that in place. But that work has really paid off at the end when you look at our retention rates for our drivers and our techs. And so
Yep,
um,
absolutely.
sometimes it takes a little bit of work. Like you said, we listened to what they wanted and what they needed, and we just adapted to that. And it took a little bit of work, but we finally got there, and it really feels like it's paying off in the end.
It absolutely is. And it's transparency of what the job is. Like, what does the job really entail? I'm glad you're bringing up the 3 day and 4 day work week um, position that we have. It's actually twofold. And a lot of people think that it's just to help and meet the employee where they're at. It actually is a better way for us to service our customers as well.
Mm-hmm.
It allows us to have a more complete dynamic route. It allows us to reach more customers in the areas that we do business. And so it's truly a win-win. A
Yeah.
customer benefits from us having that type of routing mechanism. Our employees love it. And David, I'm going to tell you, if I ever floated out the idea of going back to a 5-8 schedule, I would have a line of out the door of people saying, no, 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 no.
Yeah.
So it's a win-win. It's a great thing.
Yeah, and not to belabor the point, but a big thing was also when our drivers are getting out to the edge of kind of our delivery areas, they don't have to stay overnight anymore because they have the longer hours to drive back and spend the night with their families. And so, just keeping in mind what's important. So that kind of leads into the next question a little bit. I do want to talk about leading with empathy because I still think a lot of organizations could learn to be more empathetic. And so I do think that RT, I'm a little biased, obviously, but RT does lead with a lot of empathy. I was at a funeral on Friday for my uncle, unfortunately, but RT gave me bereavement leave, which not a lot of companies do. Some companies don't do that, which is shocking to me. But when we talk about leading with empathy, how important is that to you as the leader, HR leader of an organization? And what would you say to someone whose organization is maybe not empathetic enough, or could be more empathetic, I guess you would say?
Yeah, I'm going to change your question, David, if I can. I don't know if I have permission to do that a little bit, but I'm going to use words that I think are more that kind of resonate to empathy a little bit more clearly. It's kind of similar when people hear the word culture, they're like, what do you mean by culture? Because people define culture differently. There is a textbook definition of empathy, but I approach kind of an empathetic approach that I take is, and I've shared this with others before, I come at it with saying, if you want to be empathetic, think about it in this way. Think about providing love and clarity every day. And why I say love and clarity is because clarity is a form of love, actually. It's giving people information and helping them understand the bigger picture. But I'm going to break those two things down for you just for a second. The expectations that organizations put on leaders is incredible. They expect leaders to be able to do like everything well. The most dynamic leader. You need to have this book of competencies figured out to be successful at your company. And one thing I loved about RT is that we've really simplified what we expect out of our leaders, and they're driven in a little bit of this form of providing love and clarity. A lot of people are like, ooh, we shouldn't use the word love, especially coming out of HR. Maybe you can send me to my own office, but I'm going to explain it to you for a second. Love is this genuine, deep level of I respect you, I care about you, I want you here, I want to make sure your needs are met, that you're looking to be met. And it's on the flip side, it's I love you enough to tell you when things aren't going well. I love you enough to give you hard feedback.
Yeah.
Because I put it back into a position of, I'm a parent, I've got 3 wonderful kids. If I didn't love my kids enough to tell them, hey, they spelled that word wrong, or how do you ride a bike for the first time? And I didn't give them love and support, which we all started as children once, that is easily brought into the workforce. I'm not pushing the envelope of love, okay? I'm just saying simply find a place where people feel wanted, respected, and appreciated. David, if you didn't feel supported to spend time with your family on Friday for the loss of your uncle, you would sit down and be like, does Art even care about me? But so lead with love. Clarity is another form of empathy. It's helping people understand stuff and get their head wrapped around it. Leaving people in the dark is not a support mechanism. And it gives people anxiety and feels like they're not taken care of. And I've used this example before. I said it's like a GPS in your car. I used to take car trips with my kids all the time. When I didn't have the GPS, which is a big dashboard on our dashboard now, right in the center of our car, they'd be like, "Are we there yet? Are we there yet?" The anxiety in the car was high. It's similar at a company. What are we doing here? Where are we headed? How long is it going to take? And then all of a sudden, my kids see this GPS in the car, and they're like, "We're going to be at Grandma's house in 45 minutes." I know that it's going to take us this stop, and we're going to take this turn, and we're going to have this stoplight. That's great clarity.
Yeah.
And I think leaders can show empathy by providing those 2 things.
Yeah.
In a way that people can get their head wrapped around, and they don't get lost in the maybe a little bit of the buzzwordiness of like culture or even diversity, equity, and inclusion. If we provided just basic, raw love, I care about you, we wouldn't have to get our head wrapped around.
Yeah. And just being concepts. Real. Being real and being transparent and being genuine, I think is kind of what it comes down to, is what I'm hearing. So I think that's a really great way to kind of close out this conversation. And so, Alissa, if you don't have anything else to add, we're going to thank everyone for joining us today. Stay tuned in, like us on YouTube, share us out if you really enjoyed this conversation. And so, Alissa, again, thank you for your time. It's always really great to talk to really smart people, and you're certainly one of those people at RT, and so appreciate the time.
David, I thank you so much. If there's anything you or anybody in the industry needs, let us know. We're here to help.